Welcome, Shelley. It's amazing to have you here. And actually, I quit so you don't have to. It's what we started with. So
Yes.
we almost got cut into that having to go live. So I'd love to, well, maybe start from there. But before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself with something audacious about yourself?
Something audacious. The most audacious thing in this moment that I can think of is I am a woman on a mission, and my mission is to liberate 1 billion souls from success empty to success full. And every time I say a billion, I get chills and I feel terrified all at the same time. So that feels audacious.
Well, it does, 8 billion. And so, hey to that, hey to that. And tell me, the success empty to successful. I'd love to dig a bit deeper in there.
Yeah, well, you know my story well, and so I'll provide some
Mhm.
context for everyone who's tuning in. So, Success Empty is an idea or a concept that came to me after I had this absolute dream career. So, my corporate career, I spent 26 years in the corporate world in the advertising and marketing space, stewarding some of the most iconic brands on the planet, from McDonald's to Visa to ultimately the pinnacle of my corporate career was at Harley-Davidson, where I became the chief marketing officer. And to be honest, on paper, for a marketer, there's not really that many, sexier brands. Think about it. You get the privilege and the honor of stewarding a brand that people love so much they tattoo it on their bodies. And that's where I was. And on the outside, like I had done everything. I got the C-suite title. I was getting the big paychecks. I was living the dream. I was riding motorcycles around the world. And on the inside, I felt empty and unfulfilled and very alone. And I was like, how is this even possible? And I
Mm.
felt very guilty for even asking myself, like in private, in quiet, is this all there is? Like, we do all of the things that society tells us to do that equal, in quotes, success or successful, and yet we feel success empty. And since those days, that was about 9-ish years ago, since those days, I've realized that I am not alone, which is why I very publicly and very, raw and vulnerably tell my story, because I want others to understand that there is a way forward. We can rewrite our success scripts in alignment with our truth. And that's what starts to lead us towards success full. So when I say that,
Mm.
it's FULL, right? Because I think we overuse this word successful. Oh, she's successful. He's successful. They're successful. And it's like, what does that actually mean? And whose definition of success is it actually grounded in? So that's kind of the foundation of my work these days, based on my own experience.
Hmm. Fabulous. And I think when, you and I met a while back through our sort of joint community through the 4PC, but you obviously before this, you went through your own transition and transformation and wrote the book, the soulbatical. So I would love for you to, I suppose, again, for the listeners, just to give a little bit of a background to that and the biggest insight from that experience.
Yeah, yeah. So I was in this place at Harley that I just described. Like on the outside, everything looks fabulous and sexy and like I've got it all made. And on the inside, I'm basically drinking myself to sleep, crying every night, and I'm awakened by a nightmare. And so
Mm.
I start having the same nightmare, exactly the same nightmare. I'm seeing the same thing every night, night after night, for my entire final year at Harley. And I realize eventually that this is like the universe and my soul conspiring to wake me up, because I think, our soul speaks to us, like it whispers and then it shouts and then it'll whack us with the 2x4. And that comes in, I call it the cosmic kick in the pants, but it comes in lots of different shapes and forms. Sometimes it's, an illness, the loss of a loved one, getting laid off, COVID for many of us, the pandemic, it just, helped us get really clear on what matters most. for me, the beginning was this nightmare that tore me out of my sleep, would not let me sleep until I really faced the truth that I
Mm.
had been trying so hard to outrun. And the truth was that I was living my dad's success script. And in all honesty, it served me very, very well.
Mhm.
So this isn't me saying corporate's bad, don't do that, wanting nice things or wanting to serve iconic brands. I am not saying any of those things are bad. It was incredible. I had the greatest ride of my life. And I'm now really clear that this happened for a reason because this is my mission and I was meant to take a beat. So you mentioned soulbatical. It's the name of my book. And it is the term or the phrase that I made up
Mm.
when I suddenly understood that this nightmare was waking me up to this idea that I was living my dad's success script. I didn't really even know who I was anymore. I had no clue how I wanted to define success. What would that look like? What is Shelley Paxton's version of success? What is my truth, my values, my desires? And so that was the very beginning. And because I didn't see a lot of people around me making this kind of decision, and even mental health and well being and burnout, and so many of these things that are more normalized in
Mm.
conversation today. No one was talking about these things 8, 9 years ago. And I love that this is a part of our conversation. We have a long way to go to sort of culturally make, caring for ourselves and redefining success in a way that celebrates our well being. And we're on the path. And so I ended up leaving Harley. I created a term to call it my soulbatical because I knew it wasn't anything traditional or anything that had been done before. And now I realize at the time I thought soulbatical meant leaving your job. And now I realize it's not about leaving, it's about living. It is a
Mm.
way of being and redefining what success really looks like for each and every one of us. And so there's been an incredible evolution of my work since then.
And I love that, Shelley. Actually, what you reminded me of, because you said it's not about leaving your job as in LEAVE, the leave, but it's about leaving as in LIVI. You're living it
Mhm.
right now. And it's the same as legacy. Someone said, and it stuck with me, said this, the same statement almost. It's not about leaving a legacy to someone behind. It's about how do you live it right now in this life. It's a big distinction, and it gets you to
Yes.
sort of stop and stand in that truth of what does that mean. What does that mean to rewrite the script of success for you, rather than living your or following your dad's script, interestingly, in your case.
Yeah, and I wanna pick up on what you just said about the living in the now is so important, and it's a huge part of where my work has evolved to, because I say you started this by saying, "I quit so you don't have to," which is now what it's the title of my latest keynote, and one of the things that I say in that is, "I'm not asking you to quit your
Mm.
job. I am inviting you to quit defining success in a way that is burning you out and leaving you feeling empty and unfulfilled. And the choice is a series of intentional choices every single day. We get to decide to do this every time we wake up, in every moment that we are making choices and decisions that feel more aligned to our truth and our values and our desires. And so I now take audiences and clients and rooms full of leaders through a series of intentional choices, because we're done with kicking the can down the road to go, oh, yeah, that's for retirement. Oh, no, in about 10 years, I'll think about what it means to really feel joyful and
Mm.
fulfilled. And it's like, no, we get to do that now. We get to start making those choices and being more intentional with this precious life and with the energy that we have today. So I love that legacy and my work come together that way.
I love that. And yes, absolutely. I mean, knowing, the corporate world, as you said, you were the sort of pinnacle of it all with Harley's. And I work in the corporate world in a different way, from the outside in, now having been an insider in the financial services industry, which is a very tough business. And my book also, when I redefined audacity, so that's my mission. My mission is to redefine audacity in its positive light of not just courage and boldness, but also the care part and the non-conforming part. And the non-conforming is probably the most, difficult one to swallow in the corporate world, which it is very conforming, it is very rule driven. And yet I think we are living, as in right now, through the rules which were set so many centuries ago, and we're still applying that script, which is where the burnout and everything that we've been talking about, it's happening right now. So I love that redefinition of success, and the successful, the FULL, which it's only with intentionality. I mean, that's the word that's really, again, really landed for me. You have to be intentional, you have to be willing to go on this journey, and you don't have to quit. It's such a beautiful distinction, because it's the same as someone who's decided to quit that world and come into the entrepreneurial type of work.
Yes.
They look from the outside in, and I wish I knew so many of the things I know today, in order to not necessarily stick with it, but make a different choice at the time. So I'm curious, because again, for you, how is that looking into your conversations with your clients and your audience?
Yeah, I mean, I want to pick up on this non-conforming piece. There's so much juiciness in what you just said. I think I ask myself every day, like as I've been on this journey and I'm growing and I'm learning and I'm pushing some pretty uncomfortable edges in this work, I often reflect on, well, what would I have done differently? Now that I know what I know, what would I have done differently as a leader at Harley? What would I have done differently as a leader in everything that led up to being at Harley? And the truth is, I didn't have this calling. I wasn't on this path back then. So I can't rewrite history, and I don't intend to. At the same time, that's what made it so clear to me that my role is in paying forward what I wish I would have known to leaders who can have an impact. When I stand in front of, especially on stages, and that's really becoming the centerpiece of my work. As I stand on stages, I look into the sea of leaders and I say, every single day, you all collectively touch thousands, if not tens of thousands of lives of other souls in the workplace. You can model what it looks like and create cultures that support a redefinition of success that celebrates more humanity, more well-being, and more soul. And I am so clear that that's how we ultimately get to 1 billion. It's not about Shelley Paxton. I am one voice and one catalyst, helping other leaders to rise up and become these beautiful examples of, like wiping away this like generations old patriarchy driven definition of success that's not serving any of us. It's not serving the greater good. And so that to me is what, like, I got chills just saying it again to you. That's what lights me up when I know that there are ripples of impact that go out from other leaders like you and I standing up and making a difference. I'm also really clear, and this is the connection to the nonconformity piece that I love in your work, that it is really challenging when you start making these decisions and you say, no, I am going to create boundaries. I am going to give myself permission. I am going to pause and take some time off, or create some space for reflection and rest and rejuvenation so I can show up more powerfully and more inspired as a leader. All of those things, there are most definitely going to be people who are looking at you like, who does she think she is? Who does he think he is? And that is the challenging part, because you might feel called to be like, kind of go back. It's a bit of the tall poppy syndrome, right? You might be called to be like, okay, I'm just going to, conform and do whatever. The only way we are going to shift culture is the nonconformity piece, is more of us lifting each other up and saying, no, there's a better way to do this
Mm.
for us as individual leaders and for us collectively as organizations and a broader culture. And that's the part that really excites me. And I think we have to get real comfortable with nonconformity. And I know you wrote this line of mine in your book as well, but I say authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. That's nonconformity. We are, by definition, when we're being ourselves and really advocating, or I say rebelling for what matters most to us, we are in nonconformity. And that is the only way to start really moving toward successful and moving toward a broader definition of success that serves the greater good.
I love that, Shelley. And it's interesting you referred to the book because yes, I wanted to catch a couple of the things that you just said, but the most important one was the modeling part, the sort of role model, the leaders, how they role model to every other one of us. Because my newsletter, the Audacious Leadership newsletter that I've started on LinkedIn, I use this thing about the best leadership model is the role model. There is no other model out there. And so I role modeled a few people that I love in every one of my chapters. And you have been role modeled in the chapter of authenticity. So you remind me, I'm going to quickly grab actually to see where, because you are there as a character. Yeah, on page 184. So I'm just, most people will know that, but I remember now, it was when you were getting ready for your TEDx, because your TEDx was not yet out when I was writing that chapter.
Yes. And I had just gotten my tattoo.
That's
so on
right.
my forearm, it says authenticity is the truest form of rebellion. And I realized that's where I wanted to kind of bring it home in my TEDx talk. And now I look at that every day and it reminds me, like, stay in your truth, stay in your nonconformity, because that's how we start to shift change first in our own lives and then model, as you're saying, change, for our teams, our organizations, and for the world. And that, again, goosebumps. I love it.
And for me, the definition of authenticity is interesting. So my book is all about this courage and care, nonconformity, but also how do every single chapter, my 8 A's, and the authenticity definition is, in the title is the courage to not care. And what I mean by that, because then I also have the advocacy, which is really the passion to care so much that you move mountains, but is not to care about what other people think, which is a big distinction. So, you are still incredibly caring, yet I think in order to be authentic in the way that you also described, is you have to not care about what other people think. You cannot conform to their, way of seeing things. And, but you do still have to care so much about your mission, about your people, about, someone actually that you are willing to non-confirm. And I start that chapter of authenticity with, is it true or is it false? And even to this day, I think is one of the most difficult parts to live into. Talk about, again, using your word of living in this moment, because it's so hard to be truly authentic, i.e. to be truthful in a way that it might not, again, hurting other people's feelings. And as a recovering still people pleaser, I know how tough that is.
Amen to that, my friend. Amen to that. Yeah, it is. And this is why I fully believe people like you and me and our dear friend Mandy Leto, we find each other. Because I also want to remind everybody who's reading your book and who's tuning into this right now, you don't have to go this path alone. And that was such a big learning for me. When I was at Harley and I was experiencing all these things, I felt so tremendously alone. I said that when I was kind of setting up the foundational story at the top of this conversation. And I'm realizing this is why I love to speak to groups of people or work with groups of people, because I want us to look to our left and look to our right and look
Mm,
in front of us like I'm looking at you right now and go, I know I'm in it with her. And Alina, I've always felt that way about you and your work. I know we're in this together. I know our work is so beautifully aligned and we will lift each other up. And when it feels really terrifying because we are doing the courageous, carry, non-conforming thing, I know we're doing it together and it's
mm,
not just you and I. And so for me in this work, what's really important to me is I help others understand, like, how can you create that community, whether it's your personal board of directors, whether it's the communities that you plug into, how do you create that so you don't feel alone when you are rising up and saying, no, this is important to me because this is what success looks like to me. And this is the success culture I want to create. If you're a leader in an organization, if you're, shifting
mm,
culture is hard work. And culture is a collection of people in their beliefs. So showing people that there's a different path forward and it can look different is powerful. And I have a slide that goes to this exact point in my keynote, and it's this sea of gray birds. And I love orange. It's all over. It's my favorite color. To me, it's bold and brave and badass, and it honestly just makes me smile. And there's one orange bird that's standing taller than this sea of gray birds. And I remember when I found that image one day, I was like, that's it. That
mm,
is a picture speaks 1,000 words, because that's what it feels like. And it can be terrifying. Like, everybody's looking at you and it will be scary for them to go, do I want to take a chance? Do I want to show up that way? But, they start, like, I have people ask me all the time, it's like, you seem so happy. You look amazing. Your energy, I feel it before you walk in a room, all of that. And it's the accumulation of all the work and these intentional choices that I'm making
mm.
every day to stay in my truth, and you feel it. And I want people to be drawn to that energy, similar to how I and others are drawn to your energy.
Thank you. And actually, it is one of the things that you said, Shelley, and goes back to the other pillar, the courage. Because when you just mentioned you felt so lonely and so alone, and actually not asking for help, that was one of my biggest I think when I look back, sort of downfalls, is not having the courage to ask for help. And now, from
Yeah.
where I'm sitting today, I know that that is probably one of the biggest pieces of courage.
Yeah.
And it applies to both men and women. Sometimes, men are much worse than women at that, but we are equally bad. And I think that's probably the one advice I would give to my younger self, is don't wait for that long to put your hand up. Um,
Me too.
and it's
Me
more possible
too.
today than it was. I think there's a lot more, understanding, acceptance, and I mean, again, you and I have done the whole, coaching and executive coaching. I wouldn't be where I am today without having had my own coaches over these last 10 years, even as a corporate leader at the time.
Yeah.
And there's interesting in my work, there's still this stigma, there's still this shame. I think US, where you are on that side of the pond, is probably a lot more progressed and advanced, but I still get that in the corporates here in London, where it's like, oh, um, they still see it as a weakness rather than something to be proud of,
Yeah.
which is I think we're moving away from that, but it's an interesting observation.
Yeah, and Brene Brown has this beautiful quote, and this will be a paraphrasing of it because I don't want to butcher her. Her language is always so elegant and eloquent. The idea is we share our stories so that they can become someone else's survival guide.
Mm,
So the more you and me and others talk about raising our hands and asking for help, I also talk very openly about my story, like feeling very alone. And for so long, instead of saying, I need help, whether, in my case, it was a therapist and a coach and doctors and a whole slew of people and friends
mhm,
eventually, right? Um, instead of doing that, I was drinking myself to sleep. I was literally trying to numb and
Mm.
incapacitate the feelings that I was having, this truth that was trying to come up. And I think so many of us have our own version of
Mhm.
doing that, or the stories we're telling ourselves in our heads. And so please ask for help. Like, don't do as I do, do as I say, because I'm so much smarter now. And Alina, you had, similar thing, but asking for help is a sign of strength. It is so powerful. And I can say that, it's
Mhm.
in the top three things of what got me to where I am today. And I continually am surrounded by, I'm a huge believer in therapy. I'm a huge believer in coaching. I'm a huge believer in having your inner circle of people who, support you through it all. I'm a believer in having a personal board of directors to remind yourself of your mission and your path, and what does the high water mark look like in the space you want to be in, all of that. Right. So I think that I just wanted to spend a couple more minutes on that because I think it is so incredibly powerful. And as women, we often forget.
We do.
So
And actually,
we weren't conditioned that way. I mean, we were conditioned to believe it was weakness, not strength.
yeah, totally. And even more so for men. I mean, I say that with a lot of conviction because I know from my own
Yeah.
experience. And you sort of paraphrase Brené Brown. I think again, I've just remembered one of the other things that she says, because she's obviously the queen of vulnerability, having defined that one concept, is that we find it very attractive in someone else's, when they are vulnerable. We really we love when someone is vulnerable because it makes us feel trusted and it makes us feel
Mm.
wanted. Yet I think it feels impossible for us to allow ourselves to be vulnerable, and that's a big distinction actually. And so to keep reminding ourselves that if we like it in someone else, is having the courage to just do exactly the same. But yes,
Yes.
absolutely. And we all have our own version, as you said. The what I always call, because even the book talks about the spectrum, the two edges. For me, it's workaholism. Is the holism
Mm.
of, and that's where I drowned myself into for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And we find that, I always say, like, it's we tell ourselves stories, and often it's one of them is, I always used to say, it was like I can rose all day my way to happiness. But whatever it is, whatever your dopamine
Mm,
hit is, I love Dr. Anna Lemke's book Dopamine Nation, because it
mm,
reminds us we're all plugged into that in some way, whether it's workaholism, alcoholism, alcohol abuse, retail therapy, staying crazy busy. I mean, I could go on and on the ways that we plug in. And it's because, like me, often it's just trying to ignore what wants to come out. Right. And I often say crazy busy, which used to be my very favorite phrase when I was in the corporate world. I was like, I'm crazy busy. I see so clearly now that what I was trying to do is like, if I couldn't outrun the truth, I could try to outschedule it. And if I kept myself busy enough, I never had to sit quietly and listen deeply. And whew, I did that for a very long time.
And actually saying that, when you say crazy busy, I have a very dear friend called Zena Everett, which she is, also in my book, and that's her book, Crazy Busy. And then she wrote
Oh,
another book, which is The Cure, to Crazy Busy. It's exactly about that. So that's her
it's so
concept.
good. It's so good. That's, I think these are all, as you take away little bits from this conversation, like being aware of these as little as signs,
Mm, mm,
right? Just kind of go, ooh, maybe that means I should pause for a second, create space, listen deeply. I think the greatest gift of choosing this soulbatical path and understanding it as a way of being is that it really slowed me down, and slowing me down was an incredible gift. And yes, of course, there are days I fight it. I'm human and I love to achieve and create. I've got this audacious mission in the world, to liberate 1 billion souls. And at the same time, the only way this is going to get done is if I slow down, I listen deeply, and I stay connected to who I am and my truth, and have the courage to act on it. So, whew, But
Mm.
yeah, it's an intentional choice every single day for all of us.
Yes, huge intentionality to it. And actually, a
Mhm.
reminder for me, this is probably still my biggest challenge of slowing down and having a space. And this is what I now try to do with my retreats. You know, the ones in May and
Yeah.
the retreat is just like really taking people on that journey of slowing down intentionally. But
Oh,
I'm
it's beautiful.
yes, I'm aware we are, you know, at time. But I would love to just ask you one last question, Shelley. And I know your biggest distinction is rebel for rather than
Yeah.
rebelling against. So, what are you rebelling for right now, and how can people find you to go on that mission
Ooh.
with you?
What am I rebelling for right now? I am rebelling for mm, trust.
Mm,
I'm trusting and surrendering into this truth, this path. I'm rebelling for more stages. I really am. I feel like this evolution of my work to this new keynote, I quit so you don't have to, paying forward what I wish I would have known at Harley is so powerful and so needed. We're at this inflection point, and so I'm trusting the evolution of this work. I am trusting all the stages that are coming. And that feels terrifying and juicy. And so, yeah, if any bit of this spoke to you, then you can find me. LinkedIn is easy. I'm Shelley Paxton, Shelley with an EY. I also play on Instagram at the Shelley Paxton is where to find me there. My website is shelleypaxton.com. Yeah, and the thing that lights me up the most, lights my soul on fire, is working with other leaders and helping us all collectively shift the culture and create these ripples of impact, doing that in the form of workshops, doing that from the stage. So please reach out if there's an opportunity. I would love to be a part of your 2025 journey and beyond.
love that. And so it is, as we say in
And
4PC.
so it
And
is.
so it is. Yes, fabulous.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you, Alina.
Thank
Yes,
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you. It was a real pleasure. And I'd love to, well, to be continued. I cannot wait to hear about, you know, what's the next stage of
Yes,
your evolution. Fabulous.
thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. And have a great, I think you've got the Thanksgiving this week, which I
We
completely forgot.
do. Thanksgiving, yes, and happy holidays in general. You've already got the very merry green on. I love it. It looks good on you.
The holidays look. Thank you.
Yeah,
Happy
thank
holidays.
you.